Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hi, thank you very much for joining the Sociology Show podcast. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dan Chambliss. I'm an American sociologist. Well, I've just finished a 40-year career at one institution. So I'm 68 years old, been through a lot of things. I study the social psychology of organizations, I guess is the official title for my field. And in specific, I research how people behave in organizational settings, and within that, really how people become accustomed to doing things that are relatively unusual. For instance, I've done work on Olympic swimmers. How do you get to be really first rate at something? That's an unusual situation. Nurses in hospitals. How does one become accustomed to working, with real sick people or helping perform surgeries, things like that? And then finally, with elite college students, how do you get to be good, I guess is sort of the underlying theme of all this. How do people become really good at doing things? And in particular in organizational settings. That's my research area.
Fantastic. And that's quite a niche area. So
yeah.
How did you end up on that? You said you've been sort of within sociology for 40 years. How did your long and winding road get there, if you like?
Well, the long and winding road really had two strands to it, which are totally dissimilar. One is that I was interested in what we call continental philosophy, that is existentialism and phenomenology. Got interested in that as an undergraduate and then continued doing graduate work on that. And in particular, I was curious about the issue of personal responsibility and what is it that you're responsible for and what is it that you're not responsible for, right? Questions, you might say, of personal freedom. And then on the other end, again, totally unrelated, is that I was a competitive swimmer when I was young. And I kind of always dreamed of being a coach. And I wanted to know how people got to be good at this sport, because I was real into it, but I wasn't very good. And so it was always sort of a mystery, how do you get to be a national champion or an Olympic champion or whatnot? And so because of that, I wanted to learn about group dynamics and social psychology, because I thought that was really at the heart of quality coaching. So I started studying social psychology when I was an undergraduate, and it happened to be in a sociology department, really. And then I discovered in sociology you can basically study anything you want, and that was real appealing to me.
Yeah.
And you could put together, for instance, philosophy and psychology, or philosophy and political science. And you could study all sorts of things and still call yourself a sociologist. I had friends who were basically statisticians, and other friends who are basically philosophers. And yet we all work under this same umbrella. That's always been very appealing to me.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, actually. One of the questions that we often start with in sociology is the old nature-nurture argument, which always comes up, when someone does get to the top of the tree in whatever profession it is. Does that argument still exist? Because as sociologists, we obviously tend to lean towards the nurture side of things. Do you think that is still the most significant?
Well, yeah, I sort of have always thought sociology's job, in some sense, is to be imperialistic, right? Is to try to see how much we can explain through social factors. But that doesn't mean, but at the end of the day, still, biology exists, right? And for me, I only have to get sick to remember that, and all of a sudden, all those social factors fly out the window if you're in the bathroom throwing up. So, does that controversy still exist? Well, yeah, but I think while you're working in a discipline, there is that tendency to overemphasize, I think, the factors that you're studying, that you think are important. It's a great question, actually, and potentially a real limitation, because obviously there are other things going on than just sociology. There's biology and physics, and those things really do matter, and as well as individual personalities, which is something else sociologists tend to downplay.
It's true. That's true. One of the things that was coming into my mind as you talked about it, this idea of extraordinary performance and getting to the top. I've read quite a bit of, say, Malcolm Gladwell, who talks about this 10,000 hours theory, and that you work at something enough, anyone can master it. Do you follow that debate?
Yeah. I'd hesitate right there. Put a little asterisk by that, because the 10,000 hour rule, as he calls it, is this notion that in order to become great at something, you have to spend, 4 hours a day for 10 years is what it really is. But working in deliberate practice is the term that gets used. And that he lifted that, of course, from Anders Ericsson, who was a psychologist at Florida State University, I believe, for many years, just died recently, actually. And Gladwell credits him, but Ericsson's idea was that it was 10 years. Gladwell is a genius writer and realized that if you call it 10,000 hours, that just has a lot more punch. And so he wrote it. But the point is not that 10,000 hours is sufficient. Okay. It's not. It's necessary. Okay. It's, you might say, a starting point. You have to spend at least that much time working on something to become great. But spending that much time doesn't guarantee you're going to be great. That's the problem. Yeah. Fascinating issue. I mean, the basic point is really that you have to make it, the way I think of it is, to be great at something, it can't be a project. It has to be a lifestyle. It has to be who you are. If you're going to be a great violinist, you can't just dabble with the violin.
Yes.
Yeah. And the same is true of athletes and so on. And so people who become good at all sorts of things, I think you'll find, make it a normal part of their everyday life. It's not something they add on. It's who they are. And to get that good at something, then you have to more or less live with other people who are doing the same thing. So the key to becoming, let's say if you live in the States, if you want to become a great dancer, you have to move to New York City. I mean, that's the only way you'll be around enough other great dancers, right? Or if you want to be a comedian, you have to go to New York or LA or maybe Toronto. There are places where people gather who are good at things. If you want to be a great, let's say, sociologist, you have to go to a great university. Would be another version of that.
I want to keep on adding to this, because you've kind of given two reasons already. So the place in which you situate yourself can have an impact on your extraordinary.
Oh, it's not just can have. I think it's the easiest big first step you can take.
Yeah. So play, and then you said the people you surround yourself with. And then what are the other sort of golden elements of the formula, if you like?
Well, that one, the people you surround yourself with is not to be taken lightly. I think it gets left out of a lot of arguments about this sort of thing. There are some great psychologists, for instance, working on performance questions, and they tend to emphasize individual factors. A resilience would be an easy one, or grit, as Angela Duckworth calls it. Persistence, sticking with it, not giving up, that sort of thing is real important. Having a great and she's right, that does matter. My emphasis would be, if you're hanging around with other people who think this is important, you have a huge advantage. Karl Marx would be a nice example, of course, that he grew up hanging out with other people who were studying Hegel. And that's really crucial. Randall Collins makes the same point in his book on the sociology of philosophies, that great intellectuals always grow up around other high-end intellectuals. And then maybe one person in the group, in effect, gets credit for what was really a collective effort. What are other factors? Yeah, persistence and resilience matter a lot. Having a great mentor is almost necessary, I would say. You've got to have a teacher who really knows how to be good at the high level of things. Those are the ones that come to mind right off, as really fundamentally important. Once you have those, you've got a big advantage. Now, getting those is sometimes difficult, of course. How do you get a great teacher in your field to want to work with you? But it can be done for sure.
So I'm just thinking of a kind of a hypothetical then. So if you took an average performing sports person and placed them into an elite team for training and practice,
right?
I guess by that formula, their standards and ability would rise. The problem, of course, is they get discouraged real fast.
Right. Yeah. And so if you're trying to manage your own career, I would say what you want is to move to a group where you can survive, I guess is the way to put it, right? Long enough to be raised up quickly. Because if you can hang in there, as I say, you can get much better very quickly and I'm applying this to all sorts of fields. I think from what I've seen, it's kind of remarkable how fast you can get better at something if you're around people who really know how to do it. And you're learning not just through explicit instruction, but through, osmosis almost, but it's physical imitation of what they're doing. And you see the way they react to things and what they think is appropriate or not, and how hard, do they think you should work? So for instance, if you go to a really good school after having been at a kind of mediocre school, you see people spending much more time on homework, let's say. They spend much more time reading outside of class and working on projects and so on. And it turns out that it's a lot easier to do work like that when everybody around you is doing work like that. And they think that's a fun thing to do, or that's the way we live. The strongest example of this, of course, is learning a foreign language. So if you really want to learn German, one way to do it is to sit down with a book and try to do it. That's going to be hard. Another is to take classes. That's much easier. And the best way, of course, is to move to Germany.
Yes.
Right? Or even the extreme case is to be born in Germany. You can have no natural gift for languages, but if you're born in Germany, by the time you're 5, you're going to speak pretty decent German. Yeah. Right? Just because that's what people do. And it's necessary for your social life. And you have to learn it just to exist. And I'm suggesting the same kind of processes operate if you are, let's say if you're a surgeon, a physician who operates on people. And, if you go to medical school, you'll be surrounded by people who think it's normal to cut people open. And turns out most of the world doesn't think that. But if you go and plant yourself around people who do think that's normal, they'll show you how to do it. You'll get used to it, and pretty soon you're doing it without any problem.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for the Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
One of the things that I was thinking about, Dan, as you were just saying that, is we're often kind of sold the dream or the narrative that if you want something enough and you try hard enough, you can achieve it. You can achieve anything. Is there any truth in that? If you are surrounded by the right people, the right teachers, the right place, is there some truth in that?
Yeah, but that's a big if you put in
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah,
So, because most of us aren't surrounded by all those people. I grew up wanting to be in theater myself when I was young, and I was from Tennessee, which is a very provincial part of the United States, and we had nothing like theater training. I mean, there was a little bit of theater, but I never had a chance to learn how to sing or dance or any of that, because it just wasn't done. You know, boys, when I was a teenage boy, that would have been just unthinkable. Right, was this idea, if you just want it enough. Again, that's a big if. This is like saying, if you really want to learn badly enough, you can go to any school and learn a lot. I just don't think it's true, actually, because you'll be so socially affected by the people around you. For instance, if you want to be, again, a great athlete, let's say, and you're surrounded by people who think that's stupid or a foolish way to live or a waste of your life or something, that's going to wear you down pretty quickly, I think. So you need to be surrounded by people who think what you're doing is worthy behavior, is that foolish or stupid. So if you want it badly enough, that's almost never going to work.
yeah. I just wonder as well, is just what you're saying kind of explain why a lot of people go into the same field as their parents or their family,
yes.
for example.
Yes. Great example. I've actually been working a little on this lately. I'm thinking through that one and looking for examples and so on. Yeah, there's a lot of family inheritance of occupations of all sorts. And people sometimes think, well, that's because, there's a kind of unfairness to that, or it's, a legacy, a kind of a gift to your children or something. But I think it's more what we're talking about. That is, you grow up thinking this is a valuable thing to do, and people who are serious do this and so on. It's the parental approval. Even you take a case like, an extreme case like Mozart, people say, oh, he was so gifted and talented as a musician. That's all true. But he also grew up in a family of world-class musicians, his father was a world-class composer and his sister was a world-class pianist, and, all of that sort of thing. From birth, he lived serious high-end music. And so you can say he was talented if you want, that he had some sort of natural inborn gift, but there may be millions of people out there who have that gift who did not grow up in that kind of family. And maybe never had the chance to even take music lessons. So we don't know.
What kind of sets apart then? I'm just thinking, like you said, the normal person, the everyday person that does rise to the very top to extraordinary performance. What sets them apart? What kind of barriers do they break to get there?
The truth is, my initial thought is, I don't know. I don't know, because I'm a sociologist, right? And I'm just more interested in the broad structural conditions, you might say, that create high-end performance. So it's obvious that let's say in sports, that there are physical attributes that make a big difference. So in the sport I'm most familiar with, swimming, something like ankle flexibility. Personally, I can't. I have trouble. What's called, I can't plant or flex my feet. I can't point my toes very well, which means that when I swim, my foot, instead of pointing straight back, points a little bit toward the bottom of the pool, which is drag. It slows you down quite a bit, actually. So somebody like a Michael Phelps, a great swimmer, they have exceptionally flexible ankles and knees. Then their knees tend to flex both ways, for instance. So they're just physical characteristics, that make you more capable of doing certain things. So that I'm sure that matters, but I think that's much less. That accounts for a lot less of the variance than the kind of social factors I'm talking about. Growing up around people who support what you're doing, having the physical resources to do it. Like if you're going to be a great swimmer, you've got to have swimming pools. And lots of people in the world do not have access to swimming pools on a regular basis. or any basis, right? So you've got to have the facilities, you've got to have the space, you've got to have the time, which is to say for a lot of people, you need the money, that you don't have to spend that time working, that sort of thing. And once you take all those factors into account, I think you're covering most of the people who wind up achieving a lot.
As you were saying that, I was just thinking of in the Olympics, the Brits always do quite well at swimming and rowing. And it's like, well, we're a small island, so it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah. It's not an accident, right?
Yeah. And I wondered as well, Dan, how you collect your evidence. You're a phenomenologist, is that right? Ethnographic research.
Yes.
So what's your kind
ethnographic?
What's your kind of main methodologies?
Well, so what I'm working on right now is pulling together, right now meaning the last few years, right, the last 3 or 4 years, is I'm trying to pull together these three very different kind of research projects I've done over my career. One of which was about hospitals and nurses, the nursing services in hospitals. One was about Olympic swimmers, and one was about undergraduate, what we call college students we call in the U.S., and how those different kinds of people, what leads to success. Now, I'm sorry. Oh, the method, right? My training in graduate school was in social psychology of organizations, as I said. So I worked with Rosabeth Cantor, for instance, and Woody Powell and people like that. But I spent most of the time working with a guy named Kai Erickson, who's a community sociologist. Actually, he studies disasters mostly. He's still alive. He's 92 years old, I guess, and about to come out with a book about the Katrina hurricane.
Oh, wow.
And the destruction of community there. But anyway, I worked with Kai, and he was an ethnographer. And so all of my research really has been based on predominantly qualitative work where I just go and hang out with people. So the hospital research, I spent several years in different locations in the U.S., living there and spending a lot of time just hanging around hospitals and ICUs, intensive care units and pediatric units and psychiatric units and so on, living and working in hospitals. And then same with the swimming thing is I spent, well, it depends how you count, but probably 5 years total, something like that, with competitive swimming teams at all levels of the sport, from beginner up to Olympic class, and lived with a group of Olympic coaches for a while, went to all their meets, that sort of is. So it's ethnography, just classic hang around ethnography kind of stuff is the main method. Although in the college research, I used a lot of other methods as well and had a big research team and grants and all that.
It's the way to do sociology, isn't it, Dan? Immerse yourself.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful if you have the time. That's the key.
Yeah.
I mean, ethnography is so demanding.
Yeah.
And I'd have trouble doing it now. I'm just too old, it's hard to do. And the hospital work in particular, I mean, that a lot of that involved 12-hour shifts, overnight shifts in intensive care units, things of that sort. And I'm not going to do that now.
Certainly, I can imagine draining.
Yeah.
So, Dan, based on what you've just said, do you mind telling us a little bit about when you hope the current research is going to be released, and then also perhaps how people can find out about some of your other work as well?
Well, my other work is easy to find if you just Google Dan Chambliss, Cham, and then Bliss, like happiness, Chambliss. And my swimming research in particular has gotten a lot of attention. The mundanity of excellence is the term I used in the article, and that's gotten around a lot. So, just Googling me works out fine. You can find anything you're interested in there. And when would this? I don't know, Matthew. Truthfully, I officially just retired in June from my full-time college teaching position. And so I'm working on this, but I can't promise anything. And to tell you the truth, I had to take a break to talk to you, take a break from babysitting our year-and-a-half-old grandson who lives down the street. So I've been spending way more time with him than working on this project. But, we'll see.
Understandable. It's always a dangerous question when I ask an academic, when's the publication coming out?
When's it going to?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Next week.
Yeah.
There are a few people who work on that tight a schedule, but I'm not one of them.
No, that's great. That's great to hear. And people can add you on Twitter as well.
Oh, yes, for sure. Dan F. Chambliss on Twitter. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it'd be hard to find.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dan. I really, really appreciate it, and really interested in that about extraordinary performance,
Matthew.
how to get to the top. So best wishes to you, and enjoy more time with your grandson.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Best wishes to you. I love your podcast. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Take care now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.